I've been using the GameSir G7 Pro for 2 weeks, and I'm finally ready to give you my honest review of this controller. Quick disclaimer, I bought this controller with my own money and I'm not sponsored or affiliated with GameSir, yet. Stick around until the end for a bonus tip for console users, and consider subscribing if you find this review helpful. Alright, let's get into it. So to start off, inside the box we have the controller, a 2.4 GHz dongle, a charging dock, 2 extra D-pad variations, a braided USB A to C cable, and an Xbox Game Pass Ultimate code. The box itself is sturdy and has a premium feel to it, which is always nice. I'm also glad GameSir chose to include the charging dock instead of selling it separately. Overall, the packaging and presentation for the G7 Pro is high quality. If you're already familiar with the G7 line from GameSir, then this design should feel very familiar. The shape itself is pretty much the same as the G7 SE and HE, but with some upgrades and additions. The shape is slightly smaller and different than your standard Xbox Series controller, and will be comfortable for folks with smaller to medium-sized hands. My hands are a little on the bigger side, so it feels a tad small for my liking, but not too bad. One of the first things you may notice about the G7 Pro is the addition of 2 mappable bumpers up top. These are nicely placed, and I haven't had any issues with accidentally pressing them, but I do wish GameSir had opted for 4 back buttons or paddles instead. Speaking of back buttons, these are also the same from the previous G7 controllers, which I'm a little bummed about. They feel mushy and cheap to me, and I wish I was able to swap them out with paddles. I've also had an issue with my back left button occasionally missing inputs depending on where I press down. I'm curious if it's just my unit or others have had this issue as well, so if you've experienced anything similar, let me know in the comments. Moving on to the triggers, the G7 Pro has newly added trigger stops which make them super clicky. This is my default setting for any game right now because of how nice they feel. The bumpers are also solid but don't have the same clickiness that the triggers have. The face buttons, on the other hand, do have a really nice click that's satisfying and easy to press. Now for the D-pad, which is probably the biggest bummer about the G7 Pro. As soon as I put my hands on this controller, I could tell I wasn't going to like the D-pad. The inputs themselves are clicky, which I do like, but for some reason it just feels cheap and mushy to press. I'm unsure if it's because the material they used on the D-pads themselves, which are super light plastic, or if it's just a fundamental design flaw. Either way, it's a shame that GameSir shipped them like this because it detracts from what's otherwise a really premium feeling controller in your hands. Especially when you compare it to the sticks, which are phenomenal. The drift-proof TMR sticks really do feel more accurate, and I've noticed a difference in my aim in games like Marvel Rivals. I didn't feel any input delay while using the wireless dongle on PC, or while wired on Xbox either. I do wish they had adjustable tension because I like my right stick a little tighter, but they don't feel too loose or cheap either. You can even use your other G7 model faceplates with the G7 Pro, which is neat but not really necessary. I would have preferred the back grips to be swappable since they're rubberized and will wear down over time, but they do add a nice extra texture, so I'll take it. Similarly to the G7 SE and HE, you also get a 3.5mm mic input on the bottom, a dedicated mute button, and the M button, which lets you quickly swap between profiles that are set up in the GameSir Nexus software. Nexus is a solid piece of software that has improved a lot over time. It lets you quickly access settings for dead zones, button mapping, hair triggers, polling rate, and more for those who like to get into the nitty-gritty. While it is pretty standard for a Pro controller to have these features these days, it is nice that the software is simple and easy to navigate. You can even update your dock and controller right from the app. But apparently people are having issues if they update the controller before their dock, which is strange, and hopefully GameSir addresses that quickly. I haven't personally had any issues, but I've seen a lot of people online recommend updating the dongle before the controller, so now I'm just another person online recommending it too. As for if I recommend the G7 Pro itself, I can pretty confidently say it depends. If you plan on using the G7 Pro exclusively on Xbox, then I'd say you should probably just pick up a G7 SE or HE for half the price. Even though it's packed with features, it's hard to justify the $80 price tag for a wired console controller, especially when the wireless Wu-Chang version is on the way for only $20 more. If you're primarily a PC gamer who might also use it on Xbox, then I think it's a little easier to recommend at this price point, especially since it comes with a dock. Other than the disappointingly bad D-pad, I do think the G7 Pro is right up there with the best controllers on the market right now. TMR sticks are a tangible upgrade from standard Hall effect sensors, and for the price you are getting a Pro controller that blows first-party tech like the Xbox Elite Series 2 out of the water. Alright, time for a bonus tip. As primarily a console gamer myself, I wanted to note that the Mayflash Magic X, Brook XB3, and even the Brook FGC2 for PS5 work with this controller. Thanks to some users on Reddit, I learned that if you insert the dongle into the adapters, switch the controller to dongle mode, and hold the start and share buttons for a few seconds, your controller should pair up and work wirelessly. So if you own any of these adapters and are on the fence due to the wired Xbox connection, then hopefully this helps. Alright, that'll do it on my review for the GameSir G7 Pro. Thanks again for watching, and if you dig this sort of content, be sure to like the video, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.